Welcome back to the Global Business Report on Arise News. Human resources professional Abayomi Fawehinmi has penned an article on the significance of aviation infrastructure, in particular airports. In the article on Medium, he asks, what is an airport? Isn't an airport just a place to catch a flight or land from a flight? Can an airport be more? Well, he joins us now to discuss further using some very, very interesting examples. He is, of course, a human resources professional and an entrepreneur. Abayomi, thank you so much for joining us. Good morning to you. You mentioned the Changi Airport in Singapore. You mentioned the Changi Airport in Singapore in your article. Is that an example of where an airport can be more than just catching flights?
Yes, thank you, Roses. Good morning, and thanks for having me. One of the beauties of life is the fact that people have the opportunity to recreate spaces. For many of us in Nigeria, we see airports as places where plane lands and go. But Changi Airport in Singapore was a total redefinition of what an airport is. That airport has more plants than a botanical garden. That airport has spaces that is enough for you to do photo shoot. In fact, the most common photo shoot location in Singapore is the airport. You can imagine people wanting to do pre-wedding pictures and they are going to Murtala Mohammed Airport. That's how beautiful that airport is. Not only is it that it has those spaces, you actually pay to use the places. Now, to see how revenue sources can come to an airport because of the variety of spaces that's created. So that airport has totally redefined what it means to be an airport and says we can have a airport that is more than plane taking off and landing.
Thank you so much for that. What kind of mindsets do you think drove the creation of that airport? And what do you think, I guess, they were trying to achieve? Was it mostly about revenue?
I think it's a mindset that is driven by innovation and creativity, which is a big challenge for us in Nigeria. So you remember, for example, let's be very, very objective and look at it. If you remember the airport in Warri, not the airport called Osubi today, the current airport in Warri that is on the street called Airport Road in Warri, planes actually land on the road. As in, when a plane is going to land, they close the roads for vehicles and the plane lands on the road and turns into the airport. That's why the road is called Airport Road today in Warri. That's the kind of things we built. Now, we went further in the same Warri environment and went to build Osubi Airport. That is slightly, maybe just a little bit better than that. The problem we have is that our mindset for design is still very basic. So when we are building airports, the only thought we have is what will make the plane fly and come back. When we are building hospitals, that's what comes to our mind. When we are building houses, we only think a space to sleep and wake up and cook food. We don't have that mindset for either from the point of view of the architect or the engineer or even the property owner that we can use spaces more than we currently do. And that's what brings the innovation and the creativity. So somebody wants to build a TV station, for example, like yours, beautiful one, I must say. But the question is that what is the level of creativity that we have given the designer to come up and put spaces inside it that can create more value at the end of the day? And so that's a mindset. We have a very constrained mindset that thinks right inside the box in a world where we have an opportunity to think outside the box. And when you think about value creation as a business, for example, if you stay in the box, then you are doing the business everybody is doing and you will never be competitive. But it's when you go out of the box, or what people call red ocean thinking, that's when you can start to have those opportunities at the end of the day. And I think that's a mindset that stifles us in Nigeria. As you well know, we took a loan to build new terminals for the airport we have in Abuja and Murtala Mohammed Airport. But I can predict it. I've not been inside it, but I can predict it's just going to be the same box design that we have in the whole terminal. There's not going to be any new feature that will show the innovative thinking and the creative thinking. Let me remind you, if you look at the current design of the Murtala Mohammed Airport, the international airport, it was a copy, an exact copy, replica of the airport in Amsterdam, actually of the Schiphol airport. So what we have is that we have a situation where we have also enabled a system where people cut and paste. So, when they say people dub in exam, when we talk, we actually dub designs in this country. Somebody sees an airport somewhere, gives an architect, and comes to just replicate here and forget that is copying from Schiphol, that is a temperate area, and is coming to put in Nigeria that is a tropical area. That's why air conditioning will never work in that Murtala Mohammed Airport. You know how many ministers for aviation has invested in putting air conditioning. It will never work. Reason, the design was based on the location in a temperate area.
Excellent point. Excellent point. Can you help us define, I guess, the meaning of the phrase culture of creativity? I guess why it's lacking here.
Well, for us, the challenge we have with what I would say culture has been creativity as a system that enables people to maximize their fullest creative potentials. The challenge we have in Nigeria, and if you look at, we want to use, for example, the framework of the GIN, the Innovation Network, you see that Nigeria focuses more on the output elements of creativity. So, for example, we will use Nollywood, or we will use the way a Burna Boy wins an award as an evidence of our creativity. But from the innovation pantry, that's an output measure. Now, nobody is talking about the input measure. So, for example, if you say, for example, Burna Boy won a Grammy, which is an output measurement, you need to ask yourself how much of the input is in Nigeria. So check that album, for example, Twice Our Nights. How many people outside Nigeria contributed to it? So one problem we have is that our innovation and creativity culture is very output focused. It doesn't think about how the input. Part of the inputs are the human capital, our education, our innovation, our research, our school, our capacity to have inputs that drive society. As you well know, the contribution of Nigeria to either getting patent or awards, it's very low. So our culture is more like, what is the output without thinking about the input? So that's why, for example, when an Anthony Joshua goes to go and fight, we claim he's in Nigeria. But we forget that the input that made Anthony Joshua become a boxer was not from Nigeria. That's why, for example, when Genius is throwing his basketball, we claim his father is Nigerian. But we forget, because we're looking at the output, but we forget that part of all, the more critical part of creativity is the input part. And that's what you put into any raw materials that creates the output. Our problem is that input sector that we're not doing very well. And that's why, for example, you have an architect who will design a house and is very basic. You have somebody that designed a dress for you, and the dress is just looking very basic because we're just thinking about the output. But what is in that guy that can make him become more creative?
Excellent stuff. Abayomi, can you quickly, in your article, you juxtapose a Nigerian child and a Singaporean child both being asked to define an airport. What kind of impact, quickly if you can, does infrastructure have, I guess, imagination or in perception for youth?
So, what happens is that, I went to design school, for example. And so when they tell you to go and design the library, what comes to your mind first is the library you have seen, right? That's what comes to your mind. If you tell a child, describe a car, it's the car you have seen. If you tell a child, describe an animal, it's the animal you have seen. Now, the problem is that when we do very mediocre or basic designs, our children see them, and that's a box they have. So, for example, if a child has not seen an elephant before, in his own mind and his own judgment, if you tell him what an elephant is, his mind is an elephant is slightly bigger than a goat or a cow or a sheep or whatsoever. The problem is that child's mentality, that child's worldview, that child's capacity to appreciate that animal is limited because of what he has not seen. And that's a problem. And that's why I think as adults, we must start to think about exposing children to what will expand their mind. There's no point telling a child about an elephant. Take a child to go see an elephant in the zoo. That's the only time we will appreciate it. Now, if our children only see the Murtala Mohammed Airport in its basic state, they'll just say an airport is where you take off and land. And that's all they're going to be there for. But a child in another country will define it a wider way. And that's what allows that child to be creative, to add more things to it.
Great article. Abayomi Fawehinmi, entrepreneur, also human resources professional. Thank you so much for taking us through that. Very, very appreciate your time.